Welcome to Crush Your Sugar Cravings Summit. I'm Michelle Jolly with Healthy Horizons Coaching. Today, we're going to be speaking with Doug Reynolds of LowCarbUSA. We'll start out with a short bio to get you a little information about LowCarbUSA and what he's about. And then we'll get into the questions. The original intention of LowCarbUSA was to provide a platform through a number of conferences each year for internationally renowned scientists and medical practitioners to present the ever-increasing body of evidence on the benefits of reducing carbohydrates in your diet and adding in healthy fats. However, it has evolved into one of the primary resources for the low-carb community. This includes a huge library of educational videos, a growing database of practitioners, dietitians, and sports trainers who are open to the carb restriction conversation, as well as a searchable database of papers and articles covering the research into evidence supporting this lifestyle. Most importantly, though, he has established a panel of advisors to oversee the creation and maintenance of a set of clinical guidelines for therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, which was first published in May of 2019. Currently, he's establishing a nonprofit organization for all metabolic health practitioners, which will make accreditation available and help establish standard of care around carbohydrate restriction. Let's welcome Doug. Thanks for being with us today. So good to have you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's start out with kind of diving a little deeper into getting to know you. What's your story? How did you get into health and wellness? Where'd you get started?
Well, it started really, I suppose, when I was an endurance athlete. So I ran ultra marathons, and I wasn't an elite athlete, but I was pretty good. I finished in the top couple of percent of a field of 14,000 or something, and I would finish in the top 100, but I was still way behind the winners, so I wasn't competitive. And at that time, I thought I was bulletproof. I could eat whatever I wanted, and I never put on any weight. But as I started to get older, I started to put on weight, a couple of pounds each month or each year, and didn't seem to be able to get it off. It didn't matter how hard I ran. My knees got really sore. I felt like a slug, and I thought I was just being lazy, but I wasn't. And I got on the scale for some reason, because I never used to weigh myself. I thought I was this bulletproof runner, right? I don't even remember why I got on the scale, but I suddenly saw that I was about 35 pounds overweight for me. Yeah. And I was horrified. And just at that time, I received an email from someone saying, the title said, or the heading, the subject said, ketones, an alternative source of fuel to carbohydrates. And it kind of just came at the right time. And I started investigating it and buried myself in the science for about 3 weeks. And by the end of it, I became totally convinced that I'd been doing it all wrong, and everything we'd been taught, especially as distance athletes, was completely wrong. And so I pulled the trigger and I started on the ketogenic diet. And over the period of about 5 months, all that weight came off again. Pain in my knees cleared up, and a lot of other things that I wasn't expecting, like respiratory issues that I was having. I stopped snoring at night, for instance. I could breathe properly again. And even improved symptoms from my traumatic brain injury that I had when I was much younger. And I was, I was talking to Pam and I was saying, how is it that I was 52, 53 years old or something, and I'd never even heard of a ketone before? Yeah. And so we decided to try and do something about that, to try and teach other people what we didn't know 5 months before. And so that's how it started. We put on the first event in 2016 in July in San Diego, and it's grown since then. I think the last one we did in Boca was about our 14th event.
Wow.
And as you mentioned in the bio, you know, it's grown into a whole lot more than that. We established it to have an event, and apart from growing into multiple events, the resources that we provide now, I think, is the most important thing, and especially the clinical guidelines we've developed in this new society that we're starting for all metabolic health practitioners, so they can all become part of a movement and an organization that supports them and provides them with the training that they need.
Yeah, that's great. I wasn't a big athlete, but in high school I swam a little bit, and I remember being the coaches is telling us we need to carb load the night before and get all ready, and then during the race you're having all these sugar drinks, and especially with running and stuff too. How did that kind of come about that people realized? I know you heard about it, but then do you know why that changed with others? And
Well, it hasn't really changed. And it's the same with this whole thing, right? That it is changing, but only a small percentage of the people right now have learned about it and know about it. And over time, that's going to change. The same, and it's because of the conferences and education like we provide. That's the sort of thing that's going to eventually educate everybody else about this. My biggest thing was Professor Tim Noakes is like a legend in the distance running environment, and he wrote a book called The Law of Running, which is like known as the runner's Bible pretty much around the world. And he actually ended up developing type 2 diabetes, was put to the same as me, putting on weight and all of that. And he learned about this also through getting an email trying to sell him a book called The New Atkins for the New You, which was by Steve Finney and Jeff Folick and Eric Westman. And he thought, that's complete rubbish. But he really respected those practitioners and scientists. And so he went out and got the book and read it. And so, and he, same thing, like he realized, like after 20 minutes of reading this, he started to realize, wow, this is actually true. And so he started doing it himself too. He's basically reversed his type 2 diabetes now, got all that weight off that he was putting on like I was. And he literally made a video of him tearing out the pages of his book about carbo loading and saying, I'm really sorry, I was completely wrong about this. And I'm busy writing a revision for this book that now brings this carbohydrate restriction, running on fat concept into, so he's busy rewriting at the moment. He hasn't come out with it yet, but he will. For me, that was a huge affirmation of what I was doing was right, because he was like my hero, right?
yeah.
And when he kind of so first 3 months that I was doing this, it was like under the radar, right? I didn't tell anybody. And we just did it. But I started to feel these differences and these changes going on. And I started to feel so much better. And then I fessed up about 3 months into it. I was on the phone to my mom, actually. And I was telling her about this. And she said to me, that sounds like the Tim Noakes diet. Because by then it had become a huge phenomenon in South Africa. And so I went and looked it up immediately, and I'd been away so long, I wasn't actually up on the news there, and I didn't even know about it. But the minute I heard that, it was like, okay, we're on the right track here. If this guy has seen the light, then there's something to it for sure.
Yeah, great. So we've been talking a lot about getting rid of carbs, but how does sugar kind of fit into that? I know maybe some people don't know, kind of carbs turn into sugar in our body, or how does that all work?
Yeah,
when it
well, I
really
mean,
work together.
so the main thing is sugar first, right? That's
Mhm.
like first thing, get rid of all the sugar. And
Yeah.
the thing with that though is that there's 90% more probably of the products in any supermarket or a grocery store will have enormous amounts of added sugar, because when they took all the fat out back in 1977 or whatever, when that started, they, it tastes like cardboard, and the only way to fix that is to put sugar in it to make it
Mhm.
taste okay. So
Yeah.
everything has added sugar. So it's all very well saying stop eating sugar, don't add sugar to your tea and your coffee and that sort of stuff, but um, most of the foods that you can buy in the store that are packaged have sugar in them. So you basically got to go back to eating real food. That's the first step. Um, but then you mentioned it, is that there's carbohydrates. Basically, all that happens is the minute it hits your stomach, it turns to sugar. It turns to glucose in your blood. And so the first step is to eliminate sugar and added sugar. But after that, then you got to start looking at all the other foods that we have that contain carbohydrates or high amounts of carbohydrates. So all your root vegetables, sweet potatoes, things like pasta and quinoa and rice, those things, all those things that are heavy in carbohydrates, you need to eliminate from your diet. And you get a few carbohydrates from some of the leafy green vegetables, we call them, like the broccoli, spinach, kale, um, cauliflower, those sorts of things. Carrots are kind of in very small amounts are okay, but generally too high in carbohydrates. And so that's the next step, is to eliminate foods that are high in carbohydrates from your diet. And when you do that, you're taking out a lot of the caloric value in your diet. And so we don't advocate reducing carbohydrates or sorry, reducing calories. And so basically what you're doing is that you're making up that deficit by eating healthy fats again, by adding in saturated fats, by eating the fat on the meat. And the duck fat's incredible, and the chicken, like eat the brown meat with the fat and the skin, and start including saturated fats back into your diet again, um, that have caused so many problems since they've been eliminated from our diet back in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. So what about the people that feel like they're healthy and they don't have any pain or joint pain or chronic illness yet? What do you want to say to them to help them understand what's going on in their body before they get to that point?
Yeah, so that's like first prize for me, right? Is that our community, for the most part, is people that have become or are becoming sick, who now are looking to try and fix that. And some of us have been lucky enough to come across this concept, and so we've introduced it into our lives, and we're reversing those metabolic issues that we've developed over this time of chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption. But my first prize for me is, why wait until you get sick before you change what you eat to fix it again? Why not just eat properly from the beginning? Ken Berry's big thing, he doesn't stops calling it the ketogenic diet. He calls it the proper human diet. That's his term for it. And that's the thing, why do we have to wait until we get sick before we try and fix it? I want the younger people to understand that this stuff it's a chronic thing. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over 30, 40 years. But why not start eating as a kid in your early 20s, whatever, start eating properly then, and just never get sick. That is so important. And a lot of people, especially the ones that don't put on weight, they think, oh, I can eat carbohydrates. Look at me. I don't, you know, I don't get fat. I'm a runner or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if you have to check all their markers, their lipids and their, what's it called? The inflammation markers, especially
Yeah.
in their body, they will be chronically high, very high all the time. And so that's an accident waiting to happen. That is metabolic injury, I suppose, compromised metabolic health down the road. Maybe not right now, but if you've got all those, and you have runners, you know, marathon runners that drop dead of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Just because you're skinny doesn't mean that you're not metabolically unhealthy, and that you know, runners, even though they look thin, can still have metabolic disease, and especially cardiovascular disease, and especially diabetes. You don't have to be fat to have diabetes. I mean, if you look at Sami Inkinen, he was world champion triathlete. And while he was still competing at that level, he developed type 2 diabetes. So, you know, that negates everybody's concept that it's only the unhealthy fat people or whatever that are metabolically sick. It's not. You can be a world champion triathlete and competing at that level and be sick. And, you know, being fit and being healthy are two very different things. You can be fit enough to run an ultramarathon like I was, but I was still becoming sick. And that's what we're trying to fix.
Yeah. And I suppose they might not even know what good health feels like because they haven't given their body a chance to feel it. So they might think that's normal, feeling a few pains here and there. And
totally. And you know, I think when you're younger, that difference might not be as noticeable. But as you get older, it definitely is. You know, that's one of the things I tell people that happened to me is that almost immediately I started to feel younger again. And I noticed that especially, like we used to do these martial arts classes, like, and we do a back-to-back double class twice a week, and come home at 8 o'clock at night and like crawl in and end up getting out of bed the next day. I literally would crawl to the restroom, go to the toilet and sit there and think, hell, I'm getting old. And, you know, within a couple of weeks of changing my diet, that all that inflammation started to evaporate. I was, you know, and 3 weeks later, I was jumping out of bed and going for a run the next day after having done these workouts the night before, and literally feeling like I was back in my early 30s again when I was running all these ultra distance races. And yeah, at the age of 55, that's exceptional, you know.
Yeah, it's great. So what does that look like in your life? So people that are watching that are thinking, oh, I have all these events going on with family and picnics, and how can I eat no sugar or no low carb, or how does that work for you?
Yeah,
what are some tips for people?
That's the biggest, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, we have an organization like this, is to provide people with support, because it's all fine if you start doing it and your whole family's on board and everybody's into it. But a lot of the time, that's not the case. A lot of the time, it's one person who's read about it and believes it, wants to do it, but their husband or their wife doesn't. And in fact, I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we were talking specifically about how helpful it is to, when you do it together. And the guy that I was talking to is actually a psychiatrist. And he was giving people a lot of advice about how to deal with it if you are being sabotaged by your partner. Sometimes it just happens, and sometimes it's actually deliberate, you know, where people deliberately try and sabotage their partners because it's almost like they feel guilty about it or whatever. And so the way they deal with it is by trying to sabotage their partner and try and prove that what they're doing is rubbish or whatever.
Uh,
It's tough, and especially going out like Thanksgiving and stuff like that. Like Pam and I, we're lucky we're doing it together, but her parents don't want to hear about it. But at the same time, her mom tries to be understanding of what we're doing. So like we'll make a cauliflower mash dish or something and bring it with us. We'll do a low carb dessert or something and bring it with us. And then we just like eat the meat, that whatever it is that's part of the dish, eat our own sides that we brought. And then they'll try the cauliflower mash or whatever and say, hey, this is like really nice and whatever. But we still haven't convinced them to do this, you know. And then my parents in Australia are the same. They, it's just, it's devastating that they have all these issues and all these problems, and I know that I can help them, but they just won't listen. So yeah, I talk to the people that will listen and try to deal with the fact that I can't help my parents. But so to go back to it, that's the thing, is that if you're going to a place, try and take something with you that can contribute to the meal, but then gives you something that you can eat, if nothing else. And normally there's some kind of meat dish as part of the meal. So you eat the meat and you eat your sides that you brought along, and maybe even the dessert that you brought, and you're fine. And that way, people aren't like getting at you and making comments about the fact that you're not eating this or that or whatever.
Right.
And the other thing is to go prepared. You know, we always used to take a little baggie of macadamia nuts and some stuff that I just started making again recently called biltong, which is like a dried meat, cured meat product, which is a bit like jerky, but doesn't have any of the preservatives in, and it's really, really good. And slice up some of that and put that into a bag with a few handfuls of macadamia nuts. And that for the whole day, you're good to go on that. That's a lot of food. And so worst comes to worst, you just dip into that thing and you eat some of that, abstain from the meal, and endure the comments, and just dip into your bag and grab a handful of nuts and stuff to eat just, you know, yourself, or that you brought yourself. And yeah, you know, and really at the end of the day, if it's Christmas or one-off thing and there's no other way, have some of that food. And just don't beat yourself up about it. You know, get up the next morning, you know, and start again. It'll take you a few days to recover and get back into ketosis and all of that sort of stuff. But it's not the end of the world. I think too many people get totally hung up on it, and turn it into a huge stressful problem. Try and do what you can to avoid eating that stuff, as with some of the ideas that I've gotten. There's probably plenty of others as well. But if you're still not able to, then relax and just do it, and you know, put things back on the rails the next day, and don't turn this into a huge stressful event, because that's one of the big things about trying to be healthy, is getting good sleep and eliminating stress from your life. Those are as important as the diet, right? So if you turn Christmas or Thanksgiving or something like that into this massive stressful situation, that's wrecking your health right there. Even if you do manage to eat the right stuff and not eat the bad food, you've done yourself as much harm by stressing out about it so much. So, you know, chill out, I think, is the message there.
Yeah, great. Lots of good information. But what's going on with you? I know we're kind of we're recording this. We're in the middle of the COVID situation, but what's going on with you, and what's coming up next? How are you kind of pivoting?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're kind of in limbo at the moment. You know, our next event is scheduled in San Diego for, it's like the last weekend in August, and we still haven't been able to make a decision on that yet. You know, it needs to be like a governmental mandate that we are not allowed to have the event in order for the force majeure clause in the contract to be invoked, where the contract is basically negated, and so we don't, whatever deposits in that we've contributed so far, that's our loss, but we're not on the hook for the rest of the contract. And you know, the contracts that we end up doing with these hotels are massive, the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of contract. So before we cancel it, we need to be able to do so without being on the hook for $300,000. If it goes ahead, there's still going to be a number of people that still don't want to travel or still nervous or whatever. So it would still be nice to have it on location though. But I feel like we would have a lot more people watching it online. Like we stream it normally and we don't get a whole ton of people watching the live stream. This year, I think that's going to be different. I think there'll be a lot more. I think we'll promote it a lot more ahead of time. And in the end, it may be just a virtual event. Where but we want to try and turn it into something interactive still. So we want to try and maybe get the speakers to do it like we're doing here, but do it, stream it live, do it on Zoom, and let them share their screen and actually go through their slides and actually do their presentation, and then find a way to get everyone else to be able to log in and type in questions and stuff, so we can have the Q&A like we normally have after. And Pam wants to try and organize some kind of virtual Facebook group or something where everybody can kind of interact like they would in the expo at the event, and maybe find interesting ways to get the vendors involved in this, and give them some exposure for supporting us as much as they do through the year. And you know, I don't know, we're getting more and more ideas as it becomes more and more clear that we may well have to do this. We're kind of taking it more seriously as to what we're planning to do. And then, I suppose we could roll over everybody's tickets over to the next live event that we have. The next one that's scheduled is in Boca in January again. We're busy in the process of arranging one in Hawaii, probably in April or so. Next year's San Diego event in August next year. You know, as soon as we're able to have live events again, we will make everybody's tickets kind of valid for any of those future events. So they don't have to come back to San Diego. They could go to Hawaii instead, or go to Boca or whatever. You know, and we just try and find as many ways as we can to give people value for supporting us and buying tickets.
Yeah, well, that's great. That kind of gets us into wrapping things up and talking about your free gift, which you're going to give away a couple of tickets.
Yes, so that's the thing, and again, it would be the same thing. It's not tickets for San Diego or whatever. It would be to any, I would just, to any future event of ours that once we're allowed to have or able to have live events again, right? So that could be this August, but it doesn't have to be. They could choose whichever one they wanted to attend and claim it whenever they felt they could make it. So yeah, 2 tickets. I know that a couple of the other summits and stuff have, what they did was get all the people that signed up for it, and then at the end of the thing basically did a draw of all of those people. Like I did one once, and I put it on an Excel spreadsheet, and then I just ran a random number generator on my computer, and whatever number it came up with, whichever line on the Excel spreadsheet lined up with that person, they won the ticket. So yeah, you can decide how you want to raffle it off, but that's what we can offer.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll have a link that people can fill in and get your free ticket. Yeah, so thanks. Sorry for the sirens in the background. Thanks for talking with us today. A lot of great information that we can take with us and some information to start on our journey to low carb or reducing sugar. And hopefully everybody can follow Doug, sign up for his free gift, and you'll be able to get on his newsletter and hear more about what he's doing and get information about the upcoming events. But we just want to thank you all for coming, and thanks, Doug.
Yeah, pleasure, Michelle. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, you too.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.